Hi, and welcome to the, what I'm told is the 13th Leader Post Rider Rumblings video podcast. Nice succinct title. That was the Leader Post Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Vic Beethoven. We have two special guests this week. Murray McCormick is somewhere south of the border, so I don't think I need to introduce either of them. They're both very well known to readers of the Leader Post and media followers in general, but I will anyway. Jeff DeDecker, the outgoing entertainment coordinator of the Leader Post.
Morning.
And from Rolco Radio, from the Leader Post, from the Kindersley Clarion, from the Moose Jaw Times Herald, from the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, from Racquetball Canada, from the Regina Sports Hall of Fame, Daryl Davis. Did I miss anything?
No, that's okay, Rob. We only got half an hour here, so let's get rocking.
We could enumerate your other functions if you want. I have to apologize. I'm going on 2 hours sleep here, so the slurring of speech is not an audio problem. It's a me problem. And we're going to talk about the Rough Riders and maybe some other issues. I think Johnny Manziel's pretty topical these days, but I think the big one that people are talking about during the Rider bye week is Terrell Owens and his workout on Sunday for Chris Jones. It's been quite the story ever since. We're still waiting, as of this recording on Wednesday morning, too early. We're waiting to find out if the Rough Riders will indeed offer or proceed with the Terrell Owens thing. But I'll just throw it out there. Anybody want to comment on that one? No? Okay, we're done.
I got a kick out of your acronym, Rob. TO is too old. At 44. Is he too old? Probably not, but for a position player, he might be. Is he good enough? Maybe, maybe not. We're going to find some things out. I can't see them signing him after watching even the limited workout that we saw on video. But he's the type of guy who Chris Jones seems obsessed with. He goes after guys like that, guys who have kind of a, not that Terrell Owens was a real troublemaker, but he has kind of a up and down NFL past, and those are the types of guys who Chris Jones likes and pursues. It gets them a little bit more publicity. If he can play, then it's worth the time. But Vince Young was a horrible experiment. Didn't work at all. We were curious, but that was about it. It was a sideshow. That's to me what this is going to be. If they try it, it's just a sideshow, and I can't see any reason why they can't find a younger player who doesn't have the baggage that Terrell Owens has.
And at least when they brought Vince Young in, he had the off-season workouts, he had training camp. Whereas you bring T.O. in now, and I mean, it's the middle of the season, he's not in football shape, so it's going to take him a month at least to get into football shape. So then you're talking, we're end of August before he's even ready to play. Is it worth all the effort just to bring this guy in? Because, well, I'm an NFL fan and I like T.O. and we'll bring him in.
Wouldn't it be cool, though?
It's curiosity factor more than anything, though, Rob, isn't it? Just like the Johnny Manziel thing, right? You want to see how they play, but Jeff's point is perfect. He'll be 45 or 46 before he even starts playing if he's any good.
My big bone of contention is, will this help the Riders win? And on first glance at it, I don't think it will. So why bother?
If I look at it, though, and I'm not a massive proponent of it, but I look at their wide receivers, and I'm not sure that Terrell Owens would be a downgrade. They don't have a touchdown from someone lined up as a wide receiver this year. Deron Carter had a touchdown against Edmonton, but he was playing slot back at the time. So Joshua Stanford, Shaq Evans, Deron Carter's week 1 start at wide receiver. They have 0 touchdowns from that position after 7 games. So what can it hurt?
Well, it's not an important position in the offense that they're running. They throw short passes. Your wide receiver has to run at least 10 yards downfield to get open. So they're not. It's not the type of offense that Stephen McAdoo, the offensive coordinator, is even using. That's why they moved Deron Carter into slot back. So they have shorter passes. It fits in with their type of style. So why even have, as you say, they have 2 nobodies. I bet half the people watching couldn't even name the 2 wideouts for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and it's because they're not producing. They're not doing anything. So why would you want to add a Terrell Owens to that mix?
So that's like the chicken and the egg question, though. Like, are the wide receivers not being used because it's the offensive scheme, or are they not getting open?
Or are they not any good?
Well, yeah, that's your other point. And you talk about bringing Owens in. Where's the scouting department? Okay, granted, we have less than beautiful wide receivers, but the Riders should be able to bring in better people on a more regular basis, because I keep hearing the drums being pounded for how good the front office is and how good the scouting department is, but I haven't seen that, at least when it comes to the wide receiving position or
cornerback. Offensive line.
They've reportedly signed Luce Purifoy after his release from Ottawa,
which he's acknowledged on Twitter already. His ID already refers to himself as a member of the Saskatchewan-roughriders.
But aren't these the kind of moves that Brendan Taman was maligned for making? Mm-hmm. Bringing in retreads or whatever. Where are the fresh faces instead of the Purifoys of the world or the Terrell Owenses?
Mm-hmm. And Purifoy is one of those guys who didn't fit into Ottawa. When you read everything that happened, he wasn't the type of guy they wanted off the field. So another rebel type who can join the Saskatchewan Roughriders, not found originally by the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They found a few guys here and there. Mm-hmm. Chris Jones is found, like Willie Jefferson is kind of one of the cream of the crop.
Moncrief was a good find.
Derek Moncrief,
Samuel
Aguavin. Cresden Butler. So they have brought some good ones, but they are filling out the roster with cast-offs, which is how it works in the Canadian Football League. Do they meld together into a football team? And that's one of the points that we talk about quite a bit on our radio show is, do these guys all of a sudden come together and have a good, strong core that makes them a strong team? They released a lot of those guys, the Bakari Grants and the Rob Baggs and the Chad Owens, those types of guys. Do these new guys help to that? Chris Jones doesn't seem to care. He thinks just putting a whole bunch of talent together will make a football team. It doesn't always work that way. So you have to watch and see who he brings in. And do they have a leader like a Mike Rowley? No, because their quarterback, Zach Collaros, has been hurt most of the year. So they have to meld it somehow. It's not just talent. There's more to it than that.
So there's a bye week help at this point of the season with that melding, that they go away, refresh, recharge the batteries, then come back. Mm-hmm. Or is it just they've pushed it off into the corner and now it's the same problem when they come back? Are they really going to try and deal with that, or take the directive from Chris Jones, who says we'll just throw the most talented players on the field and we're going to be okay?
And guess what? You got Calgary right after the bye week.
Oh man, what a tough part. With Jeff, just before we went on, Jeff and I were talking about how tough this part of the schedule is. This was the 6 games section that we thought was going to determine or tell us how good or how bad the Saskatchewan Roughriders are, and they're 0-2 in this part of the 6-game section, and it's all against Western opponents. What are they? They're 5-17 under Chris Jones against Western opponents during his 2+ seasons here. That's why they're struggling. That's why they can't. They're not getting playoff. They're not doing well in the postseason. They're having trouble in the regular season. They can't beat the Western teams. Those are the guys they have to beat.
It's interesting though when you look at those last 2 games, you can extract some positives from them. I think defensively they played very well. When you look at the 34 points against Calgary was a bit deceiving. Calgary had some short fields to work with, and there was a punt return touchdown. They played well against Mike Riley for a lot of that game. There were even the most basic passes Mike Riley was having difficulty completing for a lot of that game. So you can look at those 2 games and say, well, there's some things that they can build on. Maybe the offense looked a little better with Zach Collaros at the controls. But when it comes down to it, I think those 2 games showed that you just can't get away with having a marginal offense. As the game against Edmonton reminded me a bit of the East Final last year, when Ricky Ray was being controlled quite well by the Roughriders, just like Mike Riley was being controlled quite well last Thursday. But when he had to put a drive together to win the game, he did it, just like Ricky Ray did in the East Final. I don't know if the Roughriders can put that kind of drive together.
Just like the rookie quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts did, McLeod Bethel Thompson, right? So he put something together. Are they getting game-winning performances from their quarterbacks? Not from Brandon Bridge, not from Zach Collaros. They haven't put them in that opportunity yet, but those are the games that the good teams win, as you say, that Ricky Ray wins, that Mike Riley, that Bo Levi Mitchell wins, that Travis Lulay is winning, and all of a sudden Matt Nichols in Winnipeg is capable of winning. There's a surprise over the last couple of years who's come out and become a great quarterback. The Roughriders don't have a great quarterback at the moment, and that makes them quite susceptible to a lot of these teams. And I mean, okay, so they played relatively well against Edmonton. They played relatively well against Calgary. Is the moral victory enough? I mean, and it's not.
Not at this stage.
Chris Jones has told us time and time again, it's all about winning, and that's not happening. So the moral victories are worthless. He's got to find a way to get these guys over the hump, and I don't see a quick fix coming to the offense just because he is so dead-eye focused on the defense. Imagine the defensive coordinator, head coach / GM
is a defensive guy.
Great point. And he steals the best offensive players to the defense.
Right.
He's got a great defense. It's absolutely a spectacular defense. Pressure with 3 players. Losing Derek Moncrief hurt a little because he was a great player. But that secondary, as shallow as it is still very good. They're solid everywhere across the board on defense. Share some of that strength with the offense.
You need to have a complete team if you're going to compete. You look at all the strong teams in the league, and sure, Calgary's got a great defense, but their offense isn't too shabby. Exactly. Edmonton's got a good defense. Again, offense is really good. Even BC at this point with Lule at the controls, who's made a huge difference there. Again, a good defense, a good offense. So they can compete with any team on any given night. And I'm not convinced that the Riders are in that position, given their troubles on offense, that they can compete with the best on any given day.
When you look at the quarterbacks around the division, I think the Rough Riders have to follow the leader a bit. As good as their defense is, at some point you're going to have to win an arms race, and you can't do that with a pea shooter. And that's the predicament the Rough Riders are in, because their offense is such an albatross right now. And unless Zach Collaros and that offense can somehow get moving, unless Stephen McAdoo can find some ways to really enliven that offense, I think they're destined just to wallow in mediocrity, because they just don't have, as you said, Jeff, a complete team. And when I look at that offense, though, I think the personnel's okay. The offensive line didn't allow a sack against Edmonton, and it stopped leaking like it was earlier in the year. Now they've got Zach Collaros back at quarterback. Marcus Thigpen and Trey Mason, I think they're both pretty good tailbacks. Duron Carter, Naaman Roosevelt, and Jordan Williams-Lambert is getting better every week. The wide receivers are a non-factor, but there's some decent personnel on offense. Is the system going to inhibit the personnel? Is the quarterbacking going to inhibit the some of the talent that's around the quarterback? They've got some pieces to play with. They didn't necessarily when Duron Carter was playing cornerback and when Brandon Bridge was the quarterback. Now they've got some pieces. Can they do something with it, or are they just doomed to keep getting 19 points as they did against Edmonton, and people like me saying, oh, that's better, 19 points, wow.
They have to add some pages to their playbook. Right now it's a very conservative offensive game plan, and until they change it, then are they going to be able to stay with the high scoring teams?
And McAdoo puts that conservatism on the quarterbacks. Well, then how come the quarterbacks aren't moving forward? I mean, Bridge has been here a while. He's been in the league a while. And if he can't match what you want him to do, well, maybe it's time to turn the page. But I'm not convinced that if they took the shackles off of him, that he would be as bad as McAdoo has intimated he would be. I mean, the guy's got a gun for an arm, and the Riders are limiting him to swing passes and 5-yard outs. Let's see what happens when he throws the ball down the field a few times, because in all reality, the defense doesn't have to worry about a deep pass. They're crunching onto the line of scrimmage. Even if a couple of long passes aren't complete, it at least puts that seed of activity into the minds of the defense that, geez, we better at least recognize they're going to throw the ball deep, and that might help you with the mid-range passes and the shorter ones.
Well, it seemed last year when Brandon Bridge came in relief of Kevin Glenn, by and large, that he could come in and freestyle it a bit and use his attributes and use his mobility and use his arm. And he was quite effective doing so. This year, it seems teams have had a chance to prepare for Brandon Bridge this year too, as opposed to last year they'd prepare for Kevin Glenn, and then in comes Brandon Bridge. So it's a bit of a curveball that you're throwing at the defense. But still, it's like they were strategically, it was like they were playing scared when Brandon Bridge was at quarterback, and it doesn't exactly instill confidence, nor does it when you're rotating the quarterbacks as they were for a while. So the quarterbacking as a whole has been such a massive issue, and that was one of the issues coming into the off season. I mean, it really hasn't. They were way better off a year ago with Kevin Glenn starting and Brandon Bridge relieving than they are now.
They were paying a lot less too.
Yeah. And the bottom line's good.
And if you're paying Zach Collaros $430,000 a year, let him do something.
But he was in a battle to be the starter, wasn't he?
And the other elephant in the room is Collaros, given his history, the Riders don't know that he's going to make it through the end of the season. It just takes one more hit. So then again, what are you going to allow your quarterback to do while you're trying to really, really protect him and make sure that he doesn't get another knock that puts him on the sidelines? So again, I guess McAdoo is a little bit handcuffed in that fashion, but do you just throw caution to the wind? And he looked really good the last game he played, Collaros, with throwing the ball down the field. Are we going to let him be even more aggressive this time out and take a chance that the O-line's going to be able to protect him? I mean, that's a big decision, because if he goes down again, then they're really in the deep doo-doo.
We're talking about the evolution of the offense a little bit. I think the entire team, as we watched last year for Chris Jones, and that's how he progresses. We're taking knocks at him now, which we did about this time last year too. But the team progressed. He put all these pieces together and moved them around and tried them in different spots. And we said, how ridiculous is that? But from that, he got some sort of concept of where these players should be, where they were at their best. And as the season went along, he solidified it a little bit. His roster stabilized. The positions they played were far more familiar, and he kept them together a lot more. They got pretty good at the end of the season. They had a good playoff run, close in the playoffs, but they became the best team they could be by the end of the season. And if that's what he's doing again this year, if it works again and he puts these pieces together, good for him. And good for his 85 coaches that he's got on staff and 25 scouts. I'm not sure how many he has. But because of that, they got a lot of recommendations. But by working it that way, you see a progression. And maybe we're just too early in the season to see it falling into place right now.
But sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Should that happen every season? Should that be his MO?
Well, you almost have to, though, Jeff. With the salary cap now, you lose players, right? You lose free agents. Guys retire. You decide that you don't want Bakari Grant, Rob Bagg, and Chad Owens, right? You say they're too expensive. We have to pay our money to Zach Collaros. So there is a turnover all the time in the Canadian Football League. So you have to try to find what pieces fit. On defense, he didn't have to do very much. He did bring in Charleston Hughes, a great addition, who still has some life left. Calgary didn't need him because they have a great defensive line left. Charleston Hughes is still a great defensive end. But they also had Willie Jefferson. They had Iguavin, the middle linebacker. They had Moncrief at outside linebacker. Butler in the backfield. Gainey in the backfield. Johnson in the backfield. So they're pretty good in a lot of places. And
Zach Evans was signed.
Zach Evans was signed. Great point. Yeah,
and Mikhail Brooks has made a difference.
Yes,
too.
he has. They needed to get an American in there who can stop the run. They're still very shallow in a lot of places. In the defensive backfield, they're very shallow. The offensive line and the Canadian content, they're shallow. So you try to find the best combination of guys. And it's a good point. Should he do it every year? Well, in the Canadian Football League, when they're supposed to be adhering to a cap, they have to, I believe.
Part of the problem, too, this is year 3 of this regime. So there's going to be less patience for a sluggish start than there was last year, or the year before. It was almost like a mulligan for them.
Yeah.
So you want to see a progression out of this team. You want to see that they can compete with the Calgarys and the Edmontons and even the Winnipegs of the world. And haven't seen that. They've lost their 2 games against the West Division. They somehow lost to Montreal, and that Montreal game just kind of cast a pall over the entire season. Sometimes it feels like they're 1-6 because they lost to Montreal.
When you watch the Alouettes play,
how did that happen?
Did anybody lose? We could put together a team and go out and be competitive against the Alouettes, as long as Rob wasn't quarterback.
Yeah, I played slot back at 44.
That's true.
In touch football.
I saw that. Yeah.
What did you think of Johnny Manziel segueing so smoothly into Montreal?
Well, I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, so I
my condolences.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I followed his travels, and I agree with lots of the pundits out there who were amazed that the Alouettes tossed them to the Wolves with just 4 games. I mean, you could have thrown Tom Brady out there, and given the things that he had to work with, I would have been totally gobsmacked if he had had any sort of success. So, and when he started off so poorly, there was the train just got out of control. It'll be interesting to see now what he's going to be like this week after a week of practice. And he's saying all the right things, which is kind of interesting and is unusual for Johnny. You know, he's talking about, you know, he took ownership of the debacle that was, and talks about, you know, I've got lots of things to learn. The league is humbling me. And I mean, if he's really earnest about learning and becoming that kind of quarterback, my problem with it is I don't think Montreal's the place that he's going to find that success. I mean, I think Mike Sherman he overestimated underestimated the league, and so he's playing a serious game of catch up, and he doesn't have a general manager in Kavis Reed that can help him. So I can't see that tire fire getting extinguished anytime soon. So it's interesting to see how Manziel will progress when he has to deal with all this negativity. I mean, a couple of weeks is one thing, but if he has to go through the remaining 10 weeks of the season, constantly getting pounded every week.
Is it Vince Ferragamo Part 2?
Well,
there's an old reference that
but
nobody's going to
Couldn't do it either.
But Vince, his problem was he just couldn't find that 12th guy.
Yeah.
You know, he still had all his tools, and he had a good team around him. I mean, he had great receivers, a good line, great running backs. So he should have succeeded. There was no reason for him to fail. Whereas you look at Johnny Manziel, can you name 3 other starting players on the Montreal offense that are quality players?
Yeah, I mean, Vince Ferragamo, he had James Scott, Billy White Shoes Johnson, David Overstreet. They had some weapons. Yeah. This team,
and they had a coach that knew the Canadian League and knew how to play the game. Whereas Manziel has none of that.
They got Terrell Sutton and the receiver once known as Ernest Jackson. Mm-hmm. There really isn't a lot. There really isn't a lot left in that Montreal team. How do you make that work?
I don't know. That franchise is almost it's on a bad course because it used to be one of the best. And once Robert Wettenhall, the owner, moved aside and his son Andrew took over, and has been obviously bamboozled by the friendliness of Kavis Reed. We know Kavis to be a very friendly guy, and he can convince you of a lot of things, but what's he ever done to prove that he can be a general manager? And he's proving over and over again that he's incapable of doing that job. And that's what's put Montreal in such a mess that you pointed out, Jeff. There's nobody there for Johnny Manziel to rely on. It was such a desperation move for them to get some notoriety and to get a quarterback who might be able to turn into something. But the situation that they threw him into, no way anybody could succeed there.
Well, Darryl, you've been a landmark contributor to the podcast. You're the first one to use bamboozled. Jeff, you use gobsmacked, so you're also on the board.
We need a bingo board.
So impressed by this.
Exactly.
I'm gonna have to come up with some more $48 words for next week.
Murray will walk in and say, "What do these words mean?"
Yeah. Gobsmacked. What is that?
Bamboozle.
Jeff, Darryl, thank you so much for
no commercial breaks.
No commercial breaks. We are done, and you will be uncompensated and unceremoniously escorted out the door.
Oh, my key pass didn't work when I tried to get back into the Leader Post building. It's only 10 years old.
Mine didn't either.
Mine worked today, but give it 3 days and it probably won't.
Yes, we should pay our respects to Jeff after 29 years at the Leader Post. He's leaving us at the end of the week. And
moving on, my man.
Good career, Jeff.
Way to go. Absolutely wonderful to work with you, and look forward to keeping in touch. And I hope your golf game gets down to 120 by the time the summer's over.
Right. 120 I'll be happy with.
Welcome to the Superannuate Club.
Yeah, the Superannuate Club.
I'm still here. I love being the youngest member of a trio. That doesn't happen very often, and it certainly won't happen after this week. So, Darryl, Jeff, I'm Rob Vanstone. Thanks for being with us, and we'll do it next week for number 14. And we're going to have you back, Jeff.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Take care, and thank you.